founders and players within the Ghanaian tech ecosystem could do more of telling their story really effectively.
Tech in Ghana gives me that platform, and it gives me that place where I can walk around here for a day and meet 10, 15 businesses who I can then carry on conversations with and go on to do better things and bigger things with them in business.
I got plenty of value. Great connections, great feeling of pride as a Ghanaian, great understanding of what's happening in Ghana's tech ecosystem.
It is really hard to choose one thing, but I think to pick an overarching thing that is exciting is the level of collaboration that's going on.
Our work to sum up the Ghana man. Fantastic.
Progressive.
Inspiration.
Collaboration.
It was just perfect.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Morning.
And good morning, thank you, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live. For those who are joining on LinkedIn, we're also streaming on YouTube and on Twitter. My name is Joanna Steele. I am the Managing Director of Dimax, which is a digital marketing agency. And today we have two fantastic guests who have built some really strong, credible African tech event brands, long-standing African tech event brands. And as London Tech Week is fast approaching, they have events that will be happening around that time over the next couple of weeks. And today we wanted to have a conversation between Akosua and Andrew, who are good friends, to tell us a bit more about their journeys building these two fantastic brands, what they've got planned for London Tech Week, as well as what's going on in the Africa tech ecosystem and some of their insights. So this session is going to be about 45 minutes. It's an informal conversation. Feel free to send your questions. We'll get to those at the end. And let us know in the chat, whichever channel you're on, sort of where you're watching us from. But welcome, Andrew. Welcome, Akosua.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning.
Thanks, Joe, for having us.
Good
Cool.
to be here.
Great stuff. So we want to kick off with a bit of a quick intro. I know Akosua very well. Andrew, I know you not as well, but looking forward to getting to know you a bit more during this session. So ladies first, though, we'll start with Akosua. A quick intro, who you are, how you got into the Africa tech event space.
Sure. So hello, everybody. Thanks for being with us this morning. So I'm Akosua Annabelle, founder of Tech in Ghana. I launched Tech in Ghana back in 2017. It was a flagship event of our communications and events company called AB 2020, which started initially as just a newsletter for the Africa sort of investment, tech and business communities. And then that sort of progressed into doing some business missions and doing some event management services for people. And then by 2016, I started thinking about running a platform to promote Ghana's tech ecosystem, because there was a lot of Africa tech events at that time, but not really focused on Ghana. So having recognized the gap in that market, I decided to promote Ghana's tech ecosystem in London. And subsequently, we ended up also promoting it in Accra as well. And then we then, I guess, ran the event twice a year, every year for the past 8 years. And yeah, it's kind of grown to what it is today, which I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about in a bit.
Brilliant. And Andrew, similarly to Tech in Ghana, I believe the Africa Tech Summit has been going for 8 years. Tell us a bit more about the brand and your journey so far.
An Irishman in Africa. It's a long story, but I started, I suppose, my journey in Africa around 2009. I worked in a tech startup in mobile messaging. This was kind of before, I suppose, the real connectivity piece had started. So my job was really going around knocking on the doors of mobile operators and trying to get this service launched. And we managed to launch it in Nigeria in Kenya and Zimbabwe. And then I moved on and worked for Monetize and Mobile Money and Beam and Mobile Microinsurance. So all of them are really dealing with mobile operators, which anybody who's, hope any mobile operators listening, you're lovely. But dealing with mobile operators is a painful job. But on all these trips across the continent, I was dipping into innovation hubs and meeting startups and going, wow. And as the connectivity piece was really starting to grow and the cables and things were being connected, you know, you could really begin to see that some of these startups were amazing, but weren't getting any kind of exposure. So I originally founded appsafrica.com, which is a media platform, and we were doing advisory as well, and just showcasing what was going on a personal level, and really showcasing what I was seeing was going on across the continent. I was going to a lot of conferences, but they weren't really showcasing what I believed was the guys who were doing the exciting stuff. There were more telecoms-led events, so it was very heavy for MNOs and very heavy for big IT providers, but not really focusing on the ecosystem. So after lots of introductions of people, I tried to set up Africa Tech Summit London in 2015, and we did one of the first events around then. In 2016, we did the first event in London. And from there we moved to connect. I suppose our ethos is really around connecting people in African technology in the places that they are. So we then launched Africa Tech Summit in Rwanda and Kigali. We did 3 years in Kigali, and we've just been the last 3 years in Nairobi. And we also run the African Money and DeFi Summit in West Africa as well. So it's been a long journey, exciting, and but great people like Akosua along the way.
I almost forgot about Apps Africa. Do you know that? Because that was the blog originally, wasn't it? It's really good. I forgot about that. Gosh.
Brilliant. So Andrew, how did it evolve into 3 events?
Yeah, I mean, there was no plan. There's never been a plan, and we've kind of gone and done. And I suppose, look, I was living in London at the time when I started this business, but my network was probably more in Africa. So a logical first step was Africa Tech Summit London and linking London with Africa. But obviously, it being an African technology event, it can't just be in London. And we got a lot of stick for doing the first one in London. Like, why is an African tech event in London? This is crazy. What I could see was there was a lot of capital in London and a lot of other companies who had 1 foot in London and 1 foot in Africa. And that was the vision where we were really thought London was. And same with Tech in Ghana, you know, that connecting the tissues of the different markets. And then Africa Tech Summit in Kigali was just a logical progression of having the event on the continent. And that's since moved to Nairobi. So I suppose the main brands, Africa Tech Summit, Africa Money and DeFi Summit. Within Africa Tech Summit, we always covered fintech and crypto and decentralized finance as a separate event stage. And so that became a logical progression to spin that out into something in West Africa, where a lot of our delegates were coming from, to Nairobi or to Rwanda or to London. So, and as AK has shown in Ghana, you know, the appetite in West Africa for, you know, innovation, technology and investment's huge.
Brilliant. Just a reminder to our viewers that you can send us some comments or questions and we'll get to those at the end. So guys, how did you first meet Akosua, Andrew? Do you remember?
Yes, I can't remember the very first time. I mean, obviously, the Tech London Advocates came to mind, but can you think of before that? Was it ATBN?
Yeah, like I think, Eunice. I think Eunice probably deserves a good shout out here. Eunice Baguma, she set up the African Technology Business Network, ATBN, in London, and I think we probably met through that. We're also the tallest 2 people in the room, so that was easy. But yeah, I don't know. I think it must be nearly 10 years ago since we met. And I suppose for me it was like AK very passionate about what she does. And I remember you were doing your business missions and things like that. And I could really see that she, had a real passion for giving back to Ghana and connecting people in Ghana. And that was infectious for me. And when you meet people who are really, really passionate about what they do, so we just became good friends.
Yeah, I think what you got to think about that at that time, Joe, the interest in the Africa tech industry was very small, right? It's pretty mainstream now in comparison. At that time, there was literally, it was almost like a sort of a little nerdy niche group of people that were just getting together with a like mind, and so there was very few of us that was around at that time, especially in the London sort of Africa Tech Network space. And Eunice, I'm really glad that you mentioned her. Like, she was the champion of that. She's from Uganda, but based here. And she, she used to put on these networking events. She used to do like little sort of panel sessions, and she was just really trying to drive the Africa Tech conversation. And for the few of us that were interested in it, that was literally the only place you could go at that time. I can't think of anything else really that was going on at that time. And as Andrew said, the people that you meet within that space, who you can tell that are in it for more than just, whether it's personal gain, we're ecosystem builders, so we think, from an ecosystem perspective. So that's what I picked up when meeting Andrew. It was like he had this idea of like building something bigger, and it weren't just about trying to do something for himself. And aside from that, it's just a great laugh. So we always kind of had this good, always it's a social bit of fun that went with it. And I think that's really important when you're working, just to have people that are just genuinely nice, that you genuinely like to be around, right? And I think that kind of sparked from there our friendship.
Brilliant.
Joanna, I think Costa made a very good point there. Back then, like our first event, people were talking about raising $20,000, 25,000, 30,000. 50,000 was a big number. Like there wasn't an ecosystem that has evolved today. And if you said African tech to people, they kind of laughed at you.
Yeah.
African tech, really, what's that about? Because all the money was focused on Europe, America, maybe India even more. And when you mentioned African technology, people just didn't really take it serious then. And since then, you can see, the VC ecosystems built out, the angel networks have built out, all those things have been built. But I think it's important for us to remember that this is a very, very, very young ecosystem. And 10 years ago, people were raising $20,000, and it was a big deal.
Big thing. Big thing. Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually one of the questions was, what's sort of changed? And I think you guys have already mentioned sort of how small, and perhaps people didn't really know what it was, or, it hadn't garnered that respect or built that reputation. And now, and we'll move on to this. There are so many events that are happening, particularly during London Tech Week, but sort of all year round throughout Europe, which have a sort of African tech focus, right? And so, the space, the ecosystem has grown massively, and in turn, the event space has grown, and you guys have managed to sort of, still sort of sustain your brands sort of through this growing market. So kudos to you both. I wanted to give people an understanding of how you guys work together and collaborate, right? Because I think people think, particularly in the event space, where you might be vying for sponsorship or delegates, and there's crossover between your content, that it'd be quite a competitive sort of market. And I suppose it is, right? But there's always room for collaboration. So I think it'd be good for sort of people to understand how you guys sort of both collaborate in this space, because I'm not sure people are aware.
Kind of starts like this. What date are you doing your event this year? To make sure we don't clash? Oh, right. Okay, great. That's how it kind of starts, isn't it, Andrew? It's like, even just on that basic level, it's just having respect for each other's brands to say, let's make room for each other, and let's make sure, because Africa Tech Summit in London, and Tech in Ghana has always been kind of roughly around the same time. Well, in fact, we used to be sort of more earlier in the year. But I think after the first 1 or 2 events, we were just very conscious of not stepping on each other's toes, right? And I think that then, I think, for me anyway, solidified the fact that, actually, we both really want to see each other win. But bigger than that, it's like we don't want to disturb the ecosystem. Like, we want to be able to give the startups, the investors, or whoever that comes, the breadth of opportunity to network and not have to pick between 2 really good events to go to. I mean, but I'd say that was one of the first ways in which we collaborated, like even without thinking about it.
I mean, similarly, like, I don't know, as I said at the beginning, like when I met AK first, I could see she was so determined around what she was doing, and she had a real vision with Ghana and doing that. And for me, that's like, fantastic. Like, she's doing what she's doing. Maybe we can collaborate in different ways. And the other bit is, like, there's lots of events, and I don't think one event will ever cover everything, and can't and shouldn't. And you've got more niche things looking at different things. So like, I think the more, the better. It brings more attention onto the ecosystem and brings people in. But yeah, I think it's always been pretty great in terms of working with because, I mean, we've had some good probably won't repeat some of them here, but I mean, we've had some good nights out, and it became more of a social and friendship than and sorry, like, we brought our money in DeFi Summit to Accra, and my first port of call was to phone AK, because I never wanted us to be like going, we're coming in, on your and actually AK is like, great, I can help you work on it, and really helped us develop it in Ghana, and it was a great experience for us and our team.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was I think that's the ultimate, really. It's gone from doing sort of the events in London, not stepping on each other's toes, to like literally working really closely together on bringing the Money in DeFi Summit into Accra, which is I mean, I don't know, you guys have just got the Africa Tech Summit team have just got the magic touch. Like, they just know how to bring everyone from everywhere to wherever they go, which I actually love. I love seeing that, and also learning from that and learning from each other. We have, when it comes to Ghana, I think, Andrew knows, okay, AK is a person to go to. If it comes to me wanting to sort of think bigger or wanting to see how best to sort of navigate certain things, I know that Andrew's the best person to go to. So it's just having that, I think, respect for each other. And then on the day-to-day, like even with the London Tech Week event coming up, it's like, how can we support each other? Okay, some discount code your way, throw it into our newsletter. Well, these things, they don't hurt, right? It doesn't hurt to do that. It's not a big deal. And I think if you've got the right kind of mindset in this game, you'll realize that, you're better off having allies than trying to have sort of competitors. It's just not big enough. Like we said, a decade ago, it was like, it's this big. It's not grown as big as it can be. We're nowhere near that. Right, and the best way for this thing to grow as fast as it can is to be able to collaborate, right? So that's the thing. I think the attitude that we've both got, and we just find the ways that we can do that. That's practical, and it works.
Brilliant. And so that's a nice sort of segue into sort of London Tech Week, which we know is happening the 10th to the 14th of June. Obviously, this conversation, we dubbed it sort of a London Tech Week special. And, we kind of, both brands have got events sort of in and around London Tech Week. So it'd be just good to understand, why do you think it's important for the Africa tech ecosystem to have a presence at London Tech Week? Andrew, you mentioned earlier that, it was almost a bit taboo to have an African tech focused event in London. And now it feels like we've kind of gone full circle, where there's loads happening in London and Europe, as well as the continent, right? So, I mean, why do you think it's important? Or I suppose, why do we care less now? Is it we don't mind now that there's events in London because we know that there's so much happening on the continent? Why do you think it's important for the Africa tech ecosystem to have a presence at London Tech Week, in your opinion?
first AK or I'll go?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, like as AK was saying earlier, you know, when we first met at some of those first early networking events 10 years ago in London, yeah, there wasn't much of a scene, but there's been huge change now. Like if we look at the Tech Visa, which has actually attracted a lot of founders into the UK from Africa, I think that's been huge. But the other reason really is, like, you know, there's amazing African technology that maybe the market in some African markets isn't quite there yet. If you look at e-commerce, we looked at like some of the loans and fintechs who moved also to other markets in Asia and South America. So there's a huge crossover for some of these tech ventures to expand into other markets. And I think that was, you know, that's become more and more evident. And then the venture capital side as well, you know, more and more European venture capital and UK venture capital is looking to invest in Africa, which wasn't looking maybe 10 years ago to do that. So I think, the needle's definitely moved in terms of it being, is there relevance of African technology companies coming to London to meet people? I think that's been well proven. And I know what AK does and what we do in terms of showcasing. And I think that's the important bit that, you know, is very important, because a lot of these young guys will come to London, get lost in the noise of a big London Tech Week, whereas AK will showcase them and connect them with people hand to hand, and that's invaluable. You know, that for me is like, and we get the feedback on that as well. It's like, you know, really great that we came and we met X, Y, and Z. Because otherwise they come to maybe a bigger event in London. There's no focus on Africa. There's no focus on Ghana. They get lost. But I think, you know, African technology is global now. You know, and as we spoke earlier about all these African tech ventures who are, you know, domiciled in the US as well, like it's global, and it should be global. Because previously it was American tech companies coming in and giving all the tech into Africa. So why not it African tech ventures going to Europe, US, and selling their technology elsewhere? Because it's got some of the brightest technology minds, companies, and innovators who are solving real world problems. You know, we could have both taken jobs probably and worked in laundry app companies or these other companies, but we were meeting founders who were solving healthcare, agriculture, education, you know, we could go on and on. Look at Zipline. Zipline started in Africa. You know, all these companies came to Africa first because there was a real product market need for some of these services versus services that are just another convenience app for us in the UK or Europe.
Yeah, I agree, and I think as well, like if you look at London Tech, it's one of the biggest, you know, tech festivals in Europe, and you know, African innovators need to be there. I think flipping it on its head, I think, you know, there's a lot that the European sort of tech ecosystem can learn from African innovators as well, right? It's not just about them sort of coming and gaining access, which is important. And one of the reasons why we ensured that Tech in Ghana took place during London Tech Week is also to add that value, right? When people are traveling here for an Africa Tech event, and we spoke a bit about sort of visas and stuff earlier, but if you're in the country and you're spending your money to fly into Europe or into the UK, you want to make sure that you can get the most out of it. So it was a strategic move, and I'm sure similar with you, Andrew, like to place our events during the time of London Tech Week, so that when people are in town, they can springboard off of our event right into London Tech Week and then leverage whatever other activities are going on there. So you know, I think it's just mentioning the fact that, you know, part of our strategy was to make sure that we, you know, provide as much value as we can and be mindful to the startups that are flying into the country to do our event at a time when they can get more out of being here than just participating in Tech in Ghana.
I think it'd be remiss of us not to say the earlier point, which is there is a major flaw with African technology events in London, is that the visa situation is a disaster. And we've been very vocal on this. I remember years ago we were invited to this all-party parliamentary group, and we brought a lot of. I didn't want to go because, like, number one, I'm not African, and so I'm not going to speak for Africa. So we brought a lot of technology founders. Actually, Bozin from CC Hukang, who's now the ICT minister in Nigeria. But it was raised then. The major issue is visas for African founders who want to come into London. AK just spoke this morning about one that can't get in, and we had a founder from Egypt who'd raised 20 million. He had a major logistics business, couldn't get a visa. So, I mean, that's still, let's not go on about immigration too much in the UK, but I mean, it's a huge issue. The UK likes to do business with Africa, but that really means UK going into Africa and Africa not really coming into the UK. And it has improved, I would say, with the tech visas, but it's a major issue and a major drawback for a lot of African tech founders, we find.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks for sort of mentioning that. It's not all roses, but hopefully the situation can get better, and people like yourself and Akosua can kind of continue pushing for that as much as possible. So in terms of your events, so Tech in Ghana, 11th of June, Andrew, Africa Tech Summit, 7th of June, but I think there's a pre-event on the 6th. What can we look forward to at your events? Who wants to go first? Who's attending, what sessions?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, Tech in Ghana London, what I love about it is so intimate. I mean, I love that Tech in Ghana Accra. It's like a 2-day wedding, right? It's just like, it's mammoth. But the one in London is very intimate. It's very quality over quantity, and that's what I do like about it. And it's the same this year. We've got an intimate gathering at Adelshaw Goddard. The usual breakfast, lunch, networking, drinks. But in terms of like content, we've got the usual backing, the British High Commission, the International Trade Centre. This year we've got the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Programme as well, NEIP, also supporting. The ITC are bringing a cohort of startups who are going to be doing a showcase of some of the work that they're doing in Ghana. And we've lost Joanna. I'll keep going. And we've also got it's what I was talking about. So we've got the startups, the UK and Ghana showcase. So we've got some Ghanaian startups that are coming, but we've also got people from the UK who are doing business in Ghana coming to showcase some of their startups. Usually, as usual, we're going to have the GSMA there, giving some insights into what's happening in 2025. Oh, she's back. We're back, Joe. We lost you for a minute. And then we've got insights from people like the Association of Ghanaian Startups, the Association of Ghana Industry. So it's really about like providing people with insights like on an overall of what's happening across the ecosystem. But aside from that, we're going to be looking deeply into like remote work, exploring that local global synergy. So we've got a couple of the players in that remote working space, which is growing specifically for African startups at the moment. Really good VC conversation I'm looking forward to listening to between two female powerhouses, Oyin Salibo from Techstars and also Adiza Ajani, who's based in the UK. They're going to be having like a fireside chat talking about like telling stories of the venture capital space in West Africa and just giving some insights around that. We've got a breakout session on doing business in Britain, which is going to touch on, funny enough, like some of the LSC insights as well, and just looking at some of the British Ghanaian founders who can provide insight on like what are the benefits of doing business in Britain if you're a Ghanaian startup. And most people look to London, and he's really looking outside of London and giving some hints and insights as to what you can achieve outside of London. So with the agenda is quite packed, but as I said, it's still going to be intimate. It's still going to be some nice sort of time for networking, and it's only for one day, right? So make sure that if you are coming, you spend the entire day with us. It'll be worth it.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. And Andrew, what's going on with Africa Tech Summit on the 6th and 7th of June?
Well, we're back for Tech in Ghana, so we're like the band that comes out before. So we're getting London warmed up and ready before Tech in Ghana the week before. Yeah, we've got I suppose civilly exciting couple of days. Thursday the 6th, we have a venture pre-day with AWS. So I suppose the pre-day is a little bit more relaxed. It's more intimate. Founders actually sharing what they're doing. AWS will also run a whole day on different things on AI and a whole stack of technology stack. And then we've a whole lot of other venture sessions then for that day, and then a welcome reception on the 6th, and then on the 7th at London Stock Exchange.
I'll just say their welcome receptions are legendary.
Now you've built this up now. I'm just saying. It'll be some drinks this year. We open the market then at London Stock Exchange on Friday, June the 7th, which is always quite exciting. The event's at London Stock Exchange, so they've been a good partner of the event for a number of years. But again, coming back to our earlier point, it just shows where African technology startups have come from. As we said, we're talking about $25,000 raises at the first event. We're now talking a lot more about can ventures float and raise capital on capital markets. So we have a lot of sessions around capital markets and IPOs for tech ventures with London Stock Exchange and a few others there. We also have an investor-led session, which is purely for investors with the IFC. So they're looking at, how can more capital be put into female investors or female ventures and female-led businesses. And then throughout the day, then we have a whole host of other sessions. AWS will be talking a lot about AI, obviously quite topical right now. And then we have our own investment showcase. So we put a call to action out for ventures who are looking to raise capital. And there'll be 15 ventures from across the continent who will be pitching to investors. It's not a competition. It's really, for us, it's around connecting the capital with the right ventures. And then there's a whole host of other sessions around climate, fintech, and a few founder sessions. I think, what AK does well, and I think what we try and do as well is like real honest discussion. So this year we're going to have a couple of founders who are really talking about like from the front. Like we've got, people who are coming who are dealing with serious problems right now. We've got Copia Global who are going into administration. Tracy Turner's like, yeah, I'll come and speak. I'm like, okay, that's pretty brave. They're facing a lot of headwinds in markets, but are willing to come and share on what's going on. And a few other founders who've exited and things like that, because I think right now the market is obviously slower and we're seeing less investment, less support. A lot of companies are folding, and I think right now we need to hear honest and true discussion around how some of these founders and companies can progress. But I also think there's a brighter 2025 ahead. There certainly seems to be some green shoots. There's plenty of capital in terms of funds who've raised money. There are other funds who are trying to raise money. So I suppose it's a whole mix of sharing what's really going on. And yeah, that's it really.
It's good. I think it's important, Joe, like when you with these events, is like to leave that space for the founders to speak. And a lot of the time when you do events, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we want you to come and speak on this particular subject or that particular subject. But what I found is that when we give that, like especially the showcase piece where you've got like founders just coming in to have that sort of 10-minute slot to share their experience, it's so much more, I think, valuable for the audience to really hear what is happening in the ecosystem, rather than just to sort of try and fit it into a tailored conversation. So I think that's sort of super important. It's just to make sure that you have got that space for founders, startups to really let people know what is happening in the space. And the only way you can do that is really by giving them that platform and that window to share it on the platform. I think you're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, 100%. I was saying, and I think Andrew touched on this around, what's happening now, and you talked about 2025 looking brighter. I mean, from your kind of perspectives, both of you, kind of, where do you see the Africa tech ecosystem now? Sort of, probably in a bit of a dip, we could say. But sort of, what's your hopes, or what do you think is going to happen sort of in the future, and particularly sort of what role potentially do your event brands play in that?
AK, do you want to go or
Go on.
I think, I think there's a lot of doom and gloom in some quarters about African tech, but I think if we look at the global picture, Africa, and Africa's 54 different markets, but if we look at the main issues in a lot of the markets, the dollars has a huge impact, and exchange rates in a lot of markets where they're importing a lot of stuff in dollars. So some of the markets are having a torrid time because of inflation, and the local consumer is struggling. From Accra to Nairobi to Lagos, essential stuff has gone up 25-30%. So, and these businesses who've also raised money in US dollars, some of them are growing, but in US dollar terms, their growth curve is flatlined because the dollar is killing them. So it's kind of been a perfect storm, I think, the last 12 months in terms of inflation, high interest rates. I think we're going to start to see that ease a little bit in the US. There's talk, rates coming down maybe soon, and certainly in Europe, I think they're going to come down soon. So I think things will hopefully settle down maybe a bit next year. It's probably going to come a little bit too late for some companies who maybe haven't got enough runway, and we've already seen that across the continent with a number of ventures already having to close up. I think we're also going to see a lot more mergers, acquisitions. I think if we honestly look at some sectors like fintech, how many payments platforms are there? How many remittance platforms are there? Is there a business case for 2 or 3 of these guys to merge and create a much bigger entity? We saw that with Soko in Kenya, in the distribution for SMEs. So they merged with a company in Egypt. So, and I also think that's the ecosystem maturing as well. And I think we really, really have to keep sight of how young the African tech ecosystem is. And every tech ecosystem, if we look at Silicon Valley, they had a dot-com crash, and it's soared even higher, and stuff has gone gangbusters in terms of development. So I think we also have to look at the reality. And unfortunately, right now, the consumer across most of the continent is struggling. And when your consumer is struggling, they can't afford services that, have these lovely additional bits of, ease of getting things delivered and all those nice services when you can't afford it. So, but that won't stay like that forever. And I think it also is focusing a lot of founders now. Anyone who's raising capital now is being asked, have they got revenue? Whereas before it was like, we have an idea, here's the check. I think now a lot of the founders are bootstrapping and building businesses better than maybe potentially we're being built. But I think it's almost like a consolidation phase. We're going to see some clear out. We're going to see a loss of some ventures, and you're going to see stronger companies, I think, coming out as well with mergers and acquisitions.
I'm going to come at this more from, I think some definitely valid points there, but, you know, I'm forever the optimist, and I'm going to come at this from an ecosystem perspective, having just returned, you know, last week or so from the Free Eye Summit. The Bank of Ghana did a Free Eye Summit in Accra that was completely focused on sort of leveraging and driving innovation in Africa. And there was like over 6,000 registrations to this event, and the energy, the sort of level of or the quality of attendance in terms of who was there, you know, from the AFDB, from like everybody was there. And I just got a sense that, you know, there's going to be, you know, more interest, more conversations, more connections made, more innovation, more like, I just think there's going to be just more of, from an ecosystem perspective. Of course, we're going to have these, I mean, that whole cost of living crisis I'm even hearing about here in London. I think there is a bit of doom and gloom generally, of course, in terms of the, you know, the struggles of some of the startups, and it's really hard for some of the startups in Ghana, and I'm sure across the continent. But just generally, I'm talking from the ecosystem perspective, going back to the beginning of like seeing how small it was and where it's going. I really feel that there's going to be a massive leap forward for the Africa tech scene when it comes to the ecosystem really kind of coming together and trying to figure this thing out. I mean, tomorrow I'm flying, you know, to GITEX Africa in Morocco. Hundreds of thousands of people expected to attend, you know, to do what? Talk about Africa tech, right? To talk about how we can connect more, bring more money into the ecosystem, support more startups. So I think that we're going to see a lot more of that. I think there's going to be a lot of casualties along the way. I think there's going to be a lot of, you know, a lot of mess when it comes to, you know, like you say, the, you know, currency exchange, currency issues when it comes to like trying to keep your startup running in the middle of, you know, consumers not having no money, etc. Of course. But generally, I think for the Africa tech ecosystem, we're going to see more interest, more support, and just more growth. And like I said, it's in sort of my interest to think that, believe that. but I know I truly can feel that's what's coming for us. So I'm positive. Tech in Ghana will remain very much part of, you know, the support for the ecosystem in as many ways as we can. In London, we may, I think, pivot a little bit in terms of how we show up and focus more on sort of like that trade piece. But in Ghana especially, the plan is to sort of just keep growing bigger and better, and hoping that, you know, we can be that platform that people can trust and use as, you know, the springboard to get what it is that they want to get out of the ecosystem, whether it's collaboration, whether it's money, whether it's access, you know, whether it's capacity building, whatever, our technical assistance. We'll hope to be there to support that. So yeah, really excited for after this one, the one coming up in Accra in November.
We're on to the next one.
Say it again.
We're always on to the next one. The next one.
Because you mean, you know, when you're in our position, it's like sometimes you've got to be a little bit delusional, like and just focus forward, because you can get into that space of like, oh my God, this is a mess. And it's like, you know, what I realized, especially speaking to a lot of founders, is that sometimes they look to you for that energy to like keep going. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, it's not easy out there, you know, in terms of what people are doing. So it's like, when you think about what is the position of Tech in Ghana, our position is here to support, to, you know, to help drive you, to keep your energy high, like to keep, you know, to keep your motivation going, because you need it. Do you know what I mean? You do need that, and you're gonna need that from various different, you know, I guess angles. So I just try to do, you know, people like Andrew, the people that are around me, would, you know, do our best to pick the best bits and go prop it up, you know, keep propping it up along the way. So that's just my perspective, right? It might have nothing to do with the truth, but it's my perspective.
Brilliant. Thank you for those insights, guys. And you know, it's you kind of talked about around sort of what's next for your event brand, Akosua, sort of thinking how you might pivot for London. A question has actually come in around, do you plan to, and I'm guessing this is for you, Akosua, do you plan to do a tech in Nigeria event also? I have a few tech anchors there and it might be interesting. So obviously you mentioned about pivoting with London and sort of making that maybe a bit more trade focused, but any ideas or thoughts for any other regions on the continent?
Yeah, people say that to me. They're like, you need to do tech in Nigeria, you need to do tech in like, it's like, oh, I wake up in the morning and do it. Like, of course the intention is there, but you know, we're in Ghana because I understand the Ghanaian market. I've been in Ghana. I am a Ghanaian. I've spent time there. Absolutely. Would I be open to doing, something similar in another market? Yes. Will I need some real strong, serious, focused partners to do that? Yes. So is it something that we personally are working on and something that no. I mean, there's only so much you can do. It is a huge market, and even just focusing on Ghana alone is a big job. I mean, Africa Tech Summit does a great job of, I think, covering like the continent, but I'm sure there are still like massive gaps, right, that you could probably fill. It's just impossible to do it all. The continent's huge. So I think this is what, what comes back to, I guess, what this conversation is about. If the collaboration's right, the partnership's right, I'm always open to those kinds of conversations.
I think the other point there is maybe people don't understand. We get it as well. Would you not do this? Would you not do that? We're founders as well in a small business, with a small team, and each event takes a huge amount of work. And I don't think people rock up to an event. They rock in, they get their badge, they're there for 2 days. Like, AKs have spent months planning Tech in Ghana. I'll have spent the same. And also it's just like, oh, why don't you do this event? Why don't you do that event? But it's also a huge gamble. So, and in this current climate, where startups are failing, companies are failing, we also, I suppose, have to think around our own businesses and our own. We are founders at the end of the day, and actually having to pay staff. And whether somebody shows up or not to the event, you still have to pay for the venue, the AV guy, the food and drink. So all those things are, a gamble, I suppose, on our side. And just jumping into a market and hoping it's all going to work out, I think is wishful thinking. It's because at the end of the day you're left picking up the check, and I think people don't really grasp that, and they're like, oh, why do we have to pay to come to an event? And I'm like, well, we still have a team to pay. We have to hire event, we have to pay for food and drink, we have to pay for stages, so there's a huge amount of production goes on and a huge amount of planning. So it is hard, I think, to just jump in and do something. And I think what we both tried to do is maintain quality in what we do, and so if you're going to Tech in Ghana, you're going to meet the right people, you're going to have a good experience, and it's going to be a level that you're used to. I think the danger for us as well is just jumping into a market and having a go, and I think that doesn't really serve a purpose either, because you devalue your brand, and then people then have a bad experience. So I think we'd love to do 100 events, but I mean, realistically, it's I don't think actually I don't think my team would say we're going to do 100 events. But mentally, they're very, very tough as well. Everybody is worn out. It's an intense business, very intense business. And it all looks good on the day, but there's a lot of long months before it.
Yeah, totally agree.
100%. Well, guys, we've come to the end of our conversation. I really enjoyed that. Really varied, giving us a bit of insight about what you guys are doing, how you guys work together, your thoughts on the future. It's been really, really insightful. We have another question here, but I think it's probably something that you guys can take and have a think about. Someone said, when are you two coming together to organize a tech program? Not quite sure what kind of program that is, but maybe some food for thought when you guys hook up in London in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this morning. We've had a good audience. Thank you for those who participated, sent some comments and questions in. Really appreciate it. And this recording will be available on all platforms. And yeah, have a good rest of the day. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Joanna, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for your time. See you soon.
And AK, thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.